Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Eric Schulze. He is a molecular biologist that specializes in genetic engineering. And for those of us who don't know what that means, so me, he's a meat engineer, a meat designer. His official title is Vice President of Product Regulation at Memphis Meats. And I'm sure you'll have plenty more to tell us about that. And you can also correct me if I'm wrong about your title. But thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you for this conversation.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, I gave you an intro. I don't know what a meat designer is. And so I would love to hear just a little bit about your career journey, what your work is now, and what your role is at Memphis Meats.
Yeah, the reason you don't know what a meat designer is because it's a new position. It's invented. And like much of what I have to do, we've had to figure it out from the ground up. So what I do at Memphis Meats, which is a company that designs real animal meat from animal cells up to meat. So we make familiar meats people that are used to consuming instead of breeding an animal. And the reason we say that is because, normally you breed animals and then then what we do is we eat them. And so instead of this way, we're doing the cells and going up. So we realized we needed a new position because that is fundamentally different than taking an animal and turning it into meat. We're designing the meat from the ground up, or in this case, from the cells up.
Fascinating. I am a small town country girl, grew up on a dairy farm. So this is like completely outside of any realm I've ever experienced.
Well, I'll add that I'm a small town country boy from the cornfields and cotton fields of Texas. So and to tell you, like looking back at my life and then telling you what I'd be here right now, I could never have predicted this in all of the best ways. And being a scientist has opened the world to me in ways that would have made me leave my country town, which is fantastic.
I would love to hear more about that journey. What was it like to go from Texas, and how did you become a scientist? What kind of inspired you to take this career path?
Intellectual wanderlust and a lot of self-discipline. So I can sort of, if you put those two together, the self-disciplining and a desire to want to teach yourself, I define that as curiosity. I am just by nature a very curious person, but most importantly, what got me out of where I was from, I'm a first generation college graduate, first person in my family to go to college, first person in my family to get a PhD, was oddly enough college basketball. I'm very tall. I'm almost 2 meters tall, 6'6", and my way out was going to be college sports. And I simply thought that was just going to be my ticket out. But I also realized I really liked school. And I found that to be a very odd thing that a lot of my friends didn't like to admit they liked school. I loved learning. And I realized that you can get paid to learn. In fact, that's all science is. Science, engineering, anything you do in science and STEM is being paid to learn, which is fantastic. So that's what I did. I got my way out through being curious, being pretty good in school, being pretty good at basketball, and that translated over to getting scholarships outside of the state. And I just took it from there and never stopped learning.
Amazing. That's a great tip. So kind of switching gears a little bit, we have a very wide audience. We've got students, teachers, anybody who wants to log on and watch this. I'm kind of curious, we're living in kind of new circumstances. Everyone's working from home. You and I are having these conversations from our respective homes. So how has that affected the way that you're doing work?
Well, it's made my back much more sore because I never anticipated having to work from my home. But listen, I'm in good health and I have a roof over my head. I have food, so I'm good. I think what it's made me realize, especially leading the teams that I do in my job, and I have a lot of young scientists that I work with, is relying upon the relationships that you've built with people, checking in with them, trusting that they're going to do the right things when you're not there. I think that's been a lot more trust in people. And it shows how much, if you put the work in early, that you can rely on those people later. I think that's been really, really important. But the other thing that I realized too, and science teaches you this, is to be very, very comfortable in uncertainty. Being able to adapt when you don't have all the information. And right now, we don't have all the information. But I will tell you this, scientists fundamentally live in this world. And this is something that's what made me very happy to see all of our scientist colleagues. We are comfortable giving advice when we have a little bit of information, extrapolating that out to be very accurate as possible, and then improving that as we get more information. And that gives us comfort. And during this time specifically, we will have more information tomorrow than we did yesterday, and that will make our science much better. And so therefore, every day that goes forward, every single thing we do will get more accurate, better for everyone, and we'll get through this together. And that's how I'm getting through that, knowing I take comfort in my colleagues through that.
Absolutely. It's so interesting how we're all separated. We're working from separate spaces, but it feels much more communal in some ways, and this like figuring out how to reach out in such an isolated time.
Yeah, and we are because of scientists and engineers.
Yeah.
The fact that you and I and everyone here that's listening right now, we are talking because a group of scientists came up with this idea to talk over. This is literally light communicating with itself. It's fascinating to me, and it's connected the world. So again, high five the next scientist you see for that.
Absolutely, I will. So that said, I mean, you're a scientist. You just talked about a little bit about your love of basketball. You've done so many things. You have a PhD in molecular biology, science policy strategist, STEM educator, TV producer, former federal biotech regulator. There's a lot of titles there. So you've had a lot of success in a lot of different capacities. And I'm curious if you have advice for students out there who are looking at a career. What's the most valuable piece of advice that you got in your career?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I was fortunate enough to have, I can trace back my success to three different amazing human beings who sort of took me under the wing. But I think the very most important thing, it's not a piece of advice, it was a question. And I think that's why it made it so powerful, is, Eric, you seem to have a talent for that. Do you want to learn more? And that alone really changed the trajectory of my life, because no one up to that point had really pointed that out to me. And I needed someone to say, Eric, you're kind of good at that. Or like maybe there's a nucleus of something there. Do you want to learn more about it? And they gave me the opportunity to opt in. And it made it an active choice. So I always think about that a lot when it comes to science. In terms of just how I approach the world, I treat science as a cosmic service. You are in the service of the universe. And I think that helps frame your mind in terms of the tasks that you have and why they're so hard. So I think of it in terms of planting trees in which you will never know the shade. I lead a team of very, very smart young scientists, and they themselves, I cannot wait to see the kinds of scientists there. So I think the thing is seeing yourself in a much larger picture, a much grander stage. The universe helps one. And putting it more practically, I think, shooting for Mars and hitting the moon is a great tactic for most people.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great visual too. So kind of going back a little bit, I'm curious about if you can talk more about your day-to-day in the office. So let's say it's pre-pandemic, you're going about your day-to-day. What does that look like?
It's interesting. It's not much more different than right now during the pandemic, because fundamentally, I have to, and my team and everyone I work with at Memphis Meets has to invent nearly everything we do. The knowledge, the technology, the things that even the food that we're eating, we have to invent it. So everything is more challenging from that standpoint, but more rewarding. And a lot of leading through uncertainty, as I mentioned before. Everything we do is the first time anyone in human history has known what we do. We design meat from the cell up. No one's done that before. So everything you do, I can't refer a textbook. I can't look it up online. There's nothing to Google. We have to just invent it. That is the most, I would say 95% of my day is that. And then the rest is sort of figuring out what are we going to do with the fact that we don't know this. But tomorrow, we're going to know more than we knew yesterday.
That's fascinating. It's such a creative job. It's like that intersection of STEM jobs and creativity. It really goes together in your position.
That's right. And it's for the longest time, my mom was an artist growing up, and I wanted to be an artist. I thought that that's what I was going to be. I was going to be a cartoonist in the Saturday and Sunday morning newspaper. And I realized that science and art are actually not much different. The tools which you use are different, but fundamentally you're creating something that didn't exist prior and sharing it with the world. In the case of science, it's knowledge. And I think that makes doing science at this level a lot more fun and interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. So our community has been submitting questions for you, and we got one from a middle school student in New York City who is curious about what the most difficult part of your job is and how you work through it.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to go back to my definition of curiosity. It's this insatiable wanderlust mixed with self-discipline. I think the two things, playing basketball taught me a lot about self-discipline and sort of just doing the things you say you're going to do, but also being self-disciplined to learn. And I think that has really helped, if there is anything that sets me apart, because I've said this many times, I am not special, I am not unique, I'm not particularly smart. I am an a person who just simply has tried to use every single thing that I have been gifted through my genetics and try to use them to the maximal ability. And the only way to do that is to ask questions about the world and yourself, and then explore them. And so I have this insatiable desire to teach myself, even today. And so I treat life as a wonderful opportunity to learn from nearly anything that sort of interests me, and then can I apply it? And that's what's led me to what I do now. So I guess what I'm saying is be an artist that paints reality.
Amazing. I love that. So again, you have done a lot of different things. You've tried a lot of different roles. I mean, you create every day in your role. Do you have some skills or character traits that you think students should start honing as they think about their futures and what they might want to do? I feel like you've kind of touched on it already, but definitely in that same vein of creativity.
So I think what's really important is, I think if you're watching this right now, you need to hear that, one, you're doing great. You're doing better than you think you are. And I think that's the most important thing. Having someone that tells you, like, hey, you're kind of good at this, or like, is this interesting to you? Can we learn more together? I think is really important. You'll need more practice than you think you'll need to do these sorts of things. But I think, if there's one thing that I'd say that's changed, and it's sort of an easy thing to change, but has a long-term cumulative effect, is being in the habit of just asking questions, almost to the point of being annoying. I think my parents would probably say that it was probably almost to the point of being annoying. Just being able to ask questions. And the other thing that's the external factor that you can do that will help is, of course, cultivating your self-discipline. This idea of grit, that you turn frustration into useful outcomes, that instead of getting upset with the fact that you don't know something, you figure out a different way to learn it. You ask a different question, you talk to a different person. I think are the most important things one can do.
Yeah, I mean, kind of in that vein, when you're asking a lot of questions, people might not enjoy that, or they might disagree with you. So we actually had a sixth grader in Georgia who wondered, what do you do when people disagree with you? How do you work through that?
Oh my God. Such a great question. I want to meet this, bro. What a great question. Okay. The first thing I do, believe it or not, when people truly express a disagreement with, is I thank them for feeling comfortable to express that disagreement with me. It's really hard to disagree with people. And this gets to, I think, another skill, which is being willing to accept constructive criticism, asking for it, is really important. And it's very hard to do this because it's hard to be told you're not doing something as well as you think. But getting back to the disagreement, so one, receiving that as constructive criticism. The second question I always ask is, are you willing to change your mind? Because believe it or not, if you're not willing to change your mind on anything, then the discussion is not going to be fruitful. No one's going to enjoy the conversation. It's not worth it for anyone. But if they are willing to change their mind, then you can ask questions to that person about why they disagree. So saying, I'm going to ask some questions to help myself understand why you disagree with me. At the end of that, the goal should be, you don't necessarily have to find an agreement, but you have to understand the other person's position and feel like you fully understand. Because the other person feels heard, even if you disagree at the end of it, you'll have their respect, and you'll respect them. And I think that's, at the end of the day, what the most important thing is. I disagree with lots of people in my job because of what I have to do. There are people that fundamentally disagree with what I do, and there are lots of people who agree. But we respect each other, and we can work together because, at the end of the day, we have a very basic human respect for each other and a desire to understand the other person. So the most important thing is thank them for their disagreement, and then ask questions to understand their position. And then hopefully you can get to a point of agreement, but if not, that's okay too. It's okay to respectfully disagree with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how things move forward as well. From those disagreements, you might come up with a whole other option, which is such a beautiful thing.
That's right. And also, you'll get to compromise. And believe it or not, I mean, the idea of compromise comes from people disagreeing and realizing, what am I willing to concede to function in society? And again, I couldn't do my job if I didn't fundamentally operate on compromise. It's okay to compromise. In fact, it's necessary to compromise. And again, to those of you listening today, I hope that you take this. It's okay to disagree respectfully, and it's okay to compromise. You don't always have to be right.
Yes, that's a great piece of advice for that sixth grader in Georgia, and I hope that they put it to use. Great. So your career and your job are very unique, and I'm sure that there are a lot of things that you enjoy about it, including the creativity bits. What do you find is the most rewarding part of your work?
The most rewarding part is that I get to sit at the seats of the future. I get to hold the next generation of the world in my hand, in the sense of like the technology and the knowledge. I get to invent the world, and I get to see the world that's going to happen right in front of my eyes. It's incredible to invent a scientific field. Very few people get to do this, to sort of know something for the first time. And that is incredible to be able to do that right now. And that's sort of the most exciting part. The second thing, I think, is seeing all these wonderful young human beings, early career people, even people who've had a career and have come in and work together. And you can see them becoming the next leaders, the next scientific leaders, the next engineers, whether she be a mathematician or physicist coming in and then becoming a meat designer themselves. But we're just seeing an incredible also group of people from every continent come work here, and so just the diversity of humans that want to put their minds and their hands towards developing a new food system is truly a treat. And so I just literally cannot believe how lucky I am every day to be able to get to do this.
I love that. Well, I'd love to go back to your past a little bit. When you were younger, we have a lot of first generation college students, a lot of people who are looking at college or the STEM field, and it feels overwhelming. They don't know where to start. I would love it if you would just share a little bit about that part of your journey. What was it like to be a first generation college student? How did you kind of navigate these hoops, not having necessarily the support system that a lot of other students will have?
I mean, I didn't have a support system. It was confusing. I was frustrated. I had no money. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't ask anyone for help. I basically made a boatload of mistakes, got myself into, a lot of debt, and I basically made every mistake you can make. And so I'm not going to even say that I had it all figured out, because I didn't. In fact, I had probably less figured out than most people. But what I will say is, going back, if I could do this again, or any advice to you listening, if you're considering a STEM career, one, it's completely worth it. It is a longer road. It's not like business where you can just go in and sort of start something. But I will say that once you have the skills, you're basically employable for the rest of your life. It's a unique skill set because one, it teaches you to work individually. It teaches you to work in a team. It teaches you to create. It teaches you to be disciplined. It teaches you to invent things. It teaches you to verify things. There are things, the skill sets in here to communicate, to talk to broader people, to interact with lots of different people from around the world. That is very valuable to employers. But more importantly, for your own well-being and mind, I think being a STEM practitioner, as a professional scientist, you get to say, I'm doing my part to help this planet, the people on it, the organisms on it, and then people that I will never know. So getting into it, I think the question is, one, continue to ask questions. The most important thing I would change is ask for help more often from my professors. I'd seek out people to help me. I wouldn't feel ashamed of asking for that help. But also, you have to try a lot of things to figure out what you want. STEM is a very wide, expansive field. So if you can find something, try lots of different things. I ended up liking biology and statistics, which is not what I thought I would like, but I would have only known that if I had tried a lot of different things. But I will say this, we need lots of STEM practitioners, we need lots of scientists, we need lots of engineers, especially thinking right now, who are we relying upon? Relying upon epidemiologists, molecular biologists, biomedical scientists, medical practitioners. We're going to need more of those people. So if I can entreat you, please consider going into these fields so that we can have a safe and virtuous world.
Well, that is the perfect intro for our next question, which was actually submitted this morning. A 7th grader in Delaware asked us, when did you decide that you wanted to become a molecular biologist? So when is the right time to decide, I want to go into STEM?
So I could tell you the moment it happened. I had a professor in undergrad. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was going to go to medical school, but I realized that my mind doesn't work that way. I don't memorize things very well. I had a teacher who taught, her name is Dr. Maureen Hsu, and she taught the only molecular biology course, or was going to, I should say, at the undergrad school I went to. And she's the one who said, hey, you're pretty good at this. Do you want to learn more? She ended up creating a course called Molecular Genetics. And I'll never forget, she goes, the entire class, you won't be able to see what you're doing. And I said, what? And the answer to this was, she basically said, listen, the course is I want you to take this piece of DNA from this bacteria and I want you to successfully put it into this bacteria over here. And you won't be able to see it, but you'll be able to verify it. That's the entire course. And I remember thinking, wait, we can do that? We can cut and paste DNA like text in a letter and she said, yes. And I said, wow, I want to do that. And that hooked me because you never saw it, but you did it. You could verify it without ever seeing something. I was 20 years old when that happened, and I've never looked back.
Amazing. Oh, that's such a great story. Well, unfortunately, we're running low on time, but for our final question, I would love to just wrap up today's conversation. And could you leave us with a piece of advice or two, or something that you hope that we take out of this conversation?
Yes. We'll always know more tomorrow than we did the day before. And that is the one thing I think that science teaches us. Like in today, right now, it's uncertain times. People are sick. Some people are very, very sick. Some people are dying. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, one, reality is what reality is. And that's what being a scientist teaches us. We call the world for what it is. But the most important thing to know is that we can figure it out. We always have, we always will. And that's what STEM is there for. Right now is our time to show that all of our training is worth it. And we're going to need more. And the most important thing is, and I think that's a chance to be hopeful right now. So what I'll say is this. One, you definitely can do it. If you're listening right now, if you're in middle school or in junior high or in high school, it seems like a long way away, but it's not. It's totally worth it. I've literally had the coolest career so far, and I anticipate hopefully having an even cooler career 10 years from now. And it's all because I just want to ask more questions. I never stop learning, and I'm open to suggestions and different people's different things that come along. I think that's anyone can do that. And if this country bumpkin can get out of the cornfield and into a lab, anyone can.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for this conversation today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone watching did as well. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone watching.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. We are doing these every day, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us here on Facebook Live. And if you missed the conversation, we'll post them all on our page after they air, so feel free to check them out. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.